If you are constantly thinking about how much you hate winter and it's so hard and so cold, I don't want to go outside, then you're going to feel that resistance expand, and it's going to make it so hard to even go outside for a 5-minute walk. You have to start making tweaks to your mindset in order to take action on the behaviors. Welcome to today's episode of Conquer the Day. I am your host, Lindsay Pickowitz.
And I am your co-host, Brian Pickowitz.
And today we are going to be helping you escape the winter funk or the winter blues. Or if you are familiar with this feeling, you'll know that it actually has a name, and it's called SAD for short and seasonal affective disorder for long. If you're experiencing a sense of low mood, low motivation, low energy, and you just feel like, as I said, you're in a funk because it's the heart of winter right now, we've got you today. We're going to talk about what seasonal affective disorder actually is and what's happening inside of your brain and your body that's causing it. And then we're also going to give you 6 ways to combat the feelings that come from seasonal affective disorder so that you can get momentum. You can start actually making progress on your goals physically, mentally, and in all areas of life. And then we're also going to make sure that you are set up mindset-wise, which is typically an area of SAD that people draw away from. We're going to make sure that you're set up for success on the mindset side of things too, so you can really make the most of this winter season and not feel like you have to wait till spring to actually make some progress. Okay?
So on that note, as we dive in, the key is being able to see that this is about building awareness and starting to break free from some of the cycles or the patterns that might exacerbate the symptoms or exacerbate how you're feeling. Now, like Lindsay alluded to, there is a handful of symptoms that we might be experiencing, and this might be something that you experience in a mild form, or obviously there might be more severe forms. But sticking with the scope of practice that we want to really draw into, it might be low mood, it might be low energy, it might be a dysregulation in your sleep, you might be staying in bed longer, you might also be having a harder time falling asleep or a harder time getting out of bed. You might also see a change in your nutrition desires, right? So you might be craving more carbohydrates, craving more salty and sweet foods. You might see weight gain as a result of that. Now, obviously, weight gain is going to be the result of your behaviors, and I think it's really important to differentiate between that. But it is the case that your dysregulation in your body's natural cycle, which we'll talk about in a moment, does increase appetite. Now, another piece that people don't speak too often about is that there's a social withdrawal during the winter, right? It's cold, it's dark, it gets dark late or early in the day, so we don't go and communicate with people as frequently. There's that social isolation, which can make our sense of, we'll say, sadness or our sense of depression maybe a little bit worse. And so the key is being able to start looking at some of the symptoms that we can experience, building awareness around them, and then understanding why they happen. So when we talk about seasonal affective disorder, it's the result of a change in our biological clock. So each one of us has what's called a circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm is a natural internal process that is regulated by the sun. Right, so when we experience sunlight, when we experience light through our eyes, it causes a shift in our body's mechanisms, predominantly with the hormone of cortisol, melatonin, and also, in this case, serotonin. And so you think of normal wake cycle, the sun is up, your body experiences the sunlight, and that causes a increase in cortisol. There's a decrease in melatonin, and that makes us feel alert. And then at the same time, that increase in sun exposure causes us to create more serotonin in our brain. Now, when we have a decrease in sun exposure, those hormones shift. So there's a dysregulation in our natural melatonin production because the sun isn't out as early. It goes down earlier in the day. So there's this dysregulation in that internal clock, which controls so many different physiological elements of our body. Now, to build off of this, as I said, it does impact your mood, it does impact your appetite, and it does impact your energy. All three things, though, whether it's melatonin, whether it's serotonin, whether it's the natural release of cortisol when we see the sun, all these are also exacerbated by the habits and the patterns that we don't feel as drawn towards. So if you think about the decrease in serotonin, the lowness that comes from that, we feel less desire to go and engage in movement. We tend to want to isolate ourselves. Well, and if we're not working out, it tends to exacerbate how we feel. We don't get that endorphin hit. Paradoxically, you also see the same thing with a change in our sleep cycle. So if you think of the change in our sleep cycle, if we're not sleeping like we usually do, that actually causes a dysregulation in our body's natural hormone cycle. So this shift in sleep cycles can dysregulate our metabolism hormones, leptin and ghrelin. And so these hormones are responsible for appetite. They're responsible for feeling satiated. And when there's a dysregulation in those hormones, there is more desire to eat because we don't feel as full. Right? Our body isn't functioning like it normally does. And so you start to see how there's almost like this snowball effect because we're eating more food because we don't feel as full. We're also not sleeping well. So we wake up in this funk. And if we don't pay attention to maybe some of the actions that we can take for ourselves, then it starts this cycle where it's like, wow, I really am feeling low. And so obviously, it's not enough to suggest that just working out is going to change this, or just getting some of the other modalities in place that we're going to talk about today is going to change this. But if we can start introducing small micro routines, small micro habits, the most advantageous thing we can do from my experience and perspective is introduce behaviors that allow us to feel better once the sun starts coming out again, right? Once we start reaching spring, if I'm already kind of in the cycle of taking care of myself and eating healthier, and I'm doing some of the other pieces that we're going to talk about today, then when the sun comes back, right? Comes back tomorrow, by the way. Bet your bottom dollar tomorrow, right? But once the sun comes back into our lives, right, and it's that normal long day, well, then I'm already in the rhythm, and it's a lot easier for me to gain speed. There is one piece I want to tie down too, because I talked about serotonin, I talked about melatonin, but there's also dysregulation in our natural absorption of vitamin D, because we're not getting that sun, we're not getting exposure to the sun, we're not getting our usual amounts of vitamin D, and vitamin D plays a critical role in our mood, in our mental well-being. It also plays a critical role in our immune system, and so being able to understand that, then we can start setting up some routine behaviors to offset some of the things that come.
Well said.
Thank you.
Yeah. It makes sense, right? Once you actually hear all that's going on, that leads to you feeling low or less motivated. And the reason that we start with that, again, is to give you a little bit of grace. And I think that the proper expectation, if you're listening to this in the heart of winter, is don't worry about, like you said at the beginning, right? Don't worry about trying to get yourself all hyped up so that you can absolutely crush it, right, this month. Really just think, what would make this a better winter from here on out, or maybe even in comparison to prior winters? Think, okay, I can at least make this better from here, and know that then you're set up for next year, right? So give yourself a little bit of grace, give yourself some wiggle room. If you want to go crush it, then by all means do that, do all 6 things that we're going to share with you, but at least make it better, right? At least make it better from here. So with that said, there's 6 different practical ways that you can combat the symptoms of SAD that are pretty easy to implement into your day as long as you are proactive and intentional, which is always helpful when you're trying to get healthy and work on yourself. The first practical way to combat the symptoms of SAD is to get intentional light exposure, and specifically get light exposure as soon as or as close to the time that you wake up as possible. Now you might say, well, Lindsay, it's dark outside, or it's all cloudy all the time. I know that New York City, specifically, one of our employees lives there, but she said that it was the longest stretch of no sun in, I think, the last 2 weeks or so. that New York's ever had. And she was feeling the effect of that. Now, here's the great news. Even by going outside during cloud cover, you still actually get all of the benefits of sunshine. You might not feel like it's exciting to go outside when there's cloud cover, but your body does get the positive impact as if it is sunny outside, even with cloud exposure. So as quickly as you can in the morning, get yourself by a window or get yourself outside with a coat on, get some light exposure.
One of the things you can also invest in is a light therapy lamp. So this can be something that you set up in your house first thing in the morning, get the light in your eyes, because now you don't have to just stare at it, but get on your face, get it in your eyes, because it's going to signal to your brain that this is when we wake up.
Yep.
And that can help to start resetting your circadian rhythm.
Yep.
For myself, I struggled with sleep, have my whole life, and it's really easy for me to fall into the cycle of not sleeping well at night, wanting to sleep in early in the day. One of the things I've learned about myself is that if I don't sleep well, I'm not productive for anything. So if I have a night where I don't sleep, let's say that I can't fall asleep till like 2 a.m., I do tend to sleep until about 8 a.m. just to keep myself healthy, quite frankly. But the first thing I do is if I wake up the next day, I get outside. For me, if I'm in a t-shirt, I'll go out in a t-shirt and shorts, trying to get as much sunlight as I can so that I have my circadian rhythm reset. Because if I was just to wake up and put myself in my office and not do anything, that's not helping me get back in the flow. Mm-hmm. And so that natural cycle, cortisol up, melatonin low, going through the cycle of the day, again, that's also a reminder to not expose yourself to lights at night so you don't have that offset as well, but keeping yourself in the light when you can. Another good example is going for a walk throughout the day. Doing what you can to get outside when the sun is out is the most critical point.
The second way to combat the symptoms of SAD is to get regular workouts in, get regular movement in. And I think that this is something we put way too high of expectations on. Just to feel better every day, you can just move your body for 30 minutes. Now, we are going to give you a 2-day workout plan that you can download for free and you can use if you have even a couple dumbbells at home or if you go to a gym. But really, you can have the positive impacts of exercise without having to do a full hour workout every day. Mm-hmm. Even if you just go for a walk a few times a week and then you hit 2 workouts, like you're going to be in a much, much, much better place. You'll have endorphins, you'll have that natural boost in mood and energy, and it doesn't have to be a lot.
Yeah, I think it's so important to remember you have to meet yourself where you're at. So you have to meet yourself where you're at with what you can do, how much time you have, and how much energy you have. So, for example, the other day, Lindsay and I were going out to dinner with one of our employees, and I knew that we only had like a 30-minute block where I could work out. And some things that happened that day, I had these expectations of being able to train for my typical 45 minutes to 60 minutes, and I couldn't. And I was in this spot where I was like, well, I have dumbbells at home. I have everything I need to get a workout in. And even though I felt pissed off, right, I felt angry that I could only work out for this much time, I reminded myself, like, hey, 1 is better than 0. Something is better than nothing. And so I think that if you're coming from a position where you're like, oh, I feel like I need to push myself, I need to work out hard, it's like you can still work out hard with a minimal amount of time, mm-hmm. but it's more important that you get something in, mm-hmm. that you get some movement in, especially if you're in that seasonal affective disorder. If you're in that experience of lowness and low energy, meet yourself where you're at.
Yep.
Don't set the bar so high. Say, hey, I'm going to do what I can with what I got, and I'm going to allow that to be a win. And what you'll find is, you'll probably end up working out harder than you expected, right? Usually somewhere along the lines, we're like, oh, I can do a little bit more. And secondly, it'll be easier for you to do more once you're ready.
Totally. Now, pausing us for a second. So far, as you've been listening to this, who has come to mind? I hope you're getting a lot of information and help from this yourself, but who's one person that's coming to mind right now that also really struggles during the wintertime? Take a second and just send them this podcast episode. You don't even need an explanation. Just be like, hey, give this a quick listen. If you can get somebody else involved with you, we're kind of jumping ahead because this is number 6. But if you can get somebody else involved with you to get some of these new habits or behaviors under your belt together, it's going to make a world of difference. With that said, number 3 of the 6 ways to combat the symptoms of SAD is get nutrient-dense foods, specifically healthy fats. We talked about how if you are low in the nutrients of vitamin C, or vitamin D rather, you are going to feel a low mood, you're going to feel more tired. So the more nutrient-dense foods you can get, the more satiated you're going to feel and the more energy you're going to have. So if you are going to be, let's just say, going through the course of your normal week and you're not getting as much sun exposure and you're feeling a little bit more low, be really intentional about getting yourself healthy meals, even 1 or 2 a day, as opposed to saying, I don't feel like it, and just letting yourself roll with the tide and ordering out every night, right? Really be intentional to even get one healthy, intentional, nutrient-dense meal in for the day. And that, again, compounding effect is really going to make the world a difference.
One of the things to consider, too, is increasing your protein intake, especially if you're someone who is dysregulated with your sleep. Those decrease or dysregulation, rather, experiences of our metabolism hormones can make it really hard to feel full. Increasing your protein can help with that. Mm-hmm. So just one other piece to add in there. The next piece is increasing your vitamin D. Right, Lindsay kind of alluded to this based off the food, but you can supplement it too.
Yeah, supplementation helps.
No, so obviously checking with a doctor if you have specific vitamin D needs or if you want to get blood work done, that's helpful to have more accurate data, but being able to just add in 1,000 to 2,000 IUs into your regular supplementation routine can help to offset some of the experiences of being in that deficient zone with vitamin D and improve your mood and your immune system.
Yep. And number 5, which is going to sound counterintuitive, is get cold exposure.
Why is that counterintuitive?
Because it's winter and you don't want to be exposed to cold and you want to be inside and cozy and warm.
But I like to be exposed to my weaknesses.
Cold exposure, more specifically, though, it helps regulate your cortisol. It increases your alertness, and it also improves your immune system, too. Very helpful if you don't get sick all through the winter to not get into a funk, right?
One of the things I do when I am having a hard time waking up in the morning, maybe I haven't slept well during the season, I get in a cold shower every morning. And I did that before it was cool on Instagram or TikTok, but the reason why is because it starts my day off feeling great. Now, it's not great when I'm doing it, but I have this rush of energy, especially if I'm starting from a low place. So oftentimes there's this resistance between any of these different habits. Resistance to working out, resistance to going outside, resistance to putting the cold water on and stepping in for 30 seconds. But the benefits are there at the end. So something like cold exposure, bam, especially if you're not feeling well, it can help to offset some of those depressive symptoms.
Yep. And I go for a walk in the cold almost every morning, especially if I'm not working out in the morning. And that makes a huge difference, specifically in my levels of alertness. So when I go for a walk with my dog and it's 20 degrees, I get home and I am so awake and alive without any coffee. And that's a huge help. And that's because of the cortisol increase and having that light exposure.
And because of number 6, social connection. So
do me and Alfie count as social connection?
Yes. The time you spend with Alfie going for a walk.
Yeah.
Gotta be careful. He's around, so he might hear that.
Yeah.
But we want to do our best to get with people that we feel better around. Right? So going out to dinner, going out and spending time with friends, calling someone, reaching out. I had a friend yesterday who reached out and we just chatted for a little bit. So it was such a rewarding experience. So one of the worst things you can do when you're not feeling like yourself is to isolate.
Yeah.
One of the worst things you can do is to isolate yourself because really what happens is we're social beings, but another human changes your perspective. Yeah. Another human, especially if they love you and they care about you. It changes your perspective. And you think about how humans are, we bounce off each other, right? And so if you're not in a good place. It's not just reaching out to someone saying, "Oh, I'm not in a good place, and can you help me?" It's like, "Hey, I'm going to be intentional. I'm going to reach out to a friend and say, "Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, put
Let's
things on your calendar.
let's go out to eat, or
Yeah.
I'm going to go. Who knows? Maybe go to the movies, even though it's dark, right?" Do something that puts you out in the public so that you can start to kind of interrupt that pattern and increase your social connection.
Yeah. I would bet that increases your oxytocin levels too.
Yeah, there
in
you
some
go.
capacity, which increases your happiness. But with that said, those are the main 6. Now, as we're thinking about applying these new behaviors and habits, as Brian said, there is going to be a natural resistance, right? If you're the type of person who tends to complain about the winter, even though you live in a cold place, or you feel like this
It used to be Lindsay.
it used to be me, so I can speak from experience. I'm not judging you. This is from the other side, like Adele says. So, if you typically complain about the winter and you have so much resistance around being outside when it's cold or it's dark or it's cloudy, then you have to start making tweaks to your mindset in order to take action on the behaviors. Now, walk with me for a second. There are some really great quotes, I'm sure you've heard some of them, about the power of your focus, your mental focus. There are quotes like, "What you focus on expands," "Where your focus goes, your energy flows," and even a proverb that specifically says, "For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he." If you are constantly thinking about how much you hate winter and it's so hard and so cold, I don't want to go outside, and your internal dialogue sounds like an 8-year-old version of you, then you're going to feel that resistance expand, and it's going to make it so hard to even go outside for a 5-minute walk or stand on your deck and get sun exposure for a few minutes. When in reality, those few minutes, like we said earlier, have such a massive upside, a massive benefit that you're missing out on just because your mindset is directing you away from those behaviors. Now, again, this absolutely used to be me. That's why I left New Hampshire after living here for 18 years.
Or at least why she was so open to it.
Yes. But now I'm back. And I can say from the other side, when you redirect your focus to not loving winter or loving being cold, but just embracing that, hey, this isn't my favorite, but the crisp air feels good. Or I'm so awake after I get outside for a couple minutes. Even if you can just start to redirect your mind and focus on the benefits you're getting, it's going to make such a big difference in how you feel and reduce the impact of that seasonal affective disorder you might experience.
And the key here, so what we're describing is a process called reframing. It's reframing what you're actually experiencing. And when you talk about reframing, it's not about BSing yourself and telling yourself things you don't agree with, but starting to shift your focus or shift your belief that what you're experiencing is okay, or even something as simple as, I'm excited for the spring.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm excited for the spring, and that's why I'm doing this, because when the spring comes, I want to be healthy. I want to be vibrant. I want to be able to do the things I want to do. Yeah. So I'm going to do what I can right now, and I'm excited for the spring to come. Mm-hmm. And what you'll see is the more we can start to build awareness around not just our physical habits, but our verbal habits and also our internal habits, the way we're thinking, and starting to reframe them, the easier it is to have more of the experience that you want. Yeah. But we hope this is helpful. These 6 things, we hope get you started. Like we said, we put a free workout plan for you in the show notes so you can download that and start practicing for yourself. Start putting in the routine. Start getting some movement in. But if we love this podcast, give us a thumbs up here on YouTube. Let us know what your big takeaway was in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple, shout us out. Let us know your big takeaway on Instagram by tagging us with a review of the podcast so we can hear from you. It always helps us engage and know what's helpful, what's really impacting you in this season. And on that note, Lindsay, is there anything else for you to add?
Just to pick at least 1 to 2 of the 6 ways that we shared with you. Start applying them now before winter ends, and just watch the benefits. Just watch out for them. Be mindful of them. Try to find them, and you're going to feel so much better. And with that said, take this information, go out, and conquer your day.
Cheers.
Cheers.